Go. I've got it now. Okay, we are recording. Jen, do you want to take it away?
Absolutely. I always tell my students no disclaimers. However, I'm about to make a very big disclaimer that this is very much a drafty to draft and is fitting with the bubbles in the sense that it is fleeting, except that it is now being recorded, which is fine, but it is what it is. So also trigger warning, there are some graphic images, and so I'm just letting you all know that can be disturbing. So. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Okay. It was summertime, and I signed up to attend an NEH lecture on grant writing opportunities at 1 p.m. in July. An NEH officer had agreed to present these opportunities to our university. I had registered and at 1:03 p.m. received the notification that this would be a rebroadcast of the November 16th, 2020 presentation. It was the first ever of Prairie View's rebroadcasting of an earlier presentation. There were some issues with the audio, and we heard nothing as we watched the slides go across our screen. I don't know what the humanities are anyway, or I don't need to know what the humanities are anyway. I thought everything I do is about the humanities. I listened and took notes, and once the audio came back, I noticed that some of my colleagues dropped out before the Q&A portion of the presentation. And the original presenter changed from speaker version to the gallery view so that you could see everyone who attended the presentation or their avatar. There was a moment on the screen that you could see everyone and you could see the movement. I recognized the disheveled top knot of the white professor on the left, immediately under the speaker and gallery view. It was me. I watched in horror as I realized I was in my t-shirt that I'd cut out the neck because I find them too constraining. I wasn't wearing makeup. I wasn't looking at the screen, but I remembered why. I had a migraine. I know me. This is when I was trying to tough it out. Before I had called my neurologist's office and begged for a steroid to break the migraine. But I guess I had decided in my constant desire to be better at my job that this was an opportunity that I just couldn't miss. I had to get this National Endowment of the Humanities grant. I walked, as I was cleaning the screen, I wiped it, walked behind, went to the trash can and put the wipe in the trash can. I walked back to the computer. All of this was on screen. My constant movement was distracting. The university's facilitator piped in and said, I just want to remind everyone that this presentation is being recorded. As I watched this in July of 2021, in horror, I realized that that comment was directed at me. At the time, I was in such a state where I really had no idea that my camera was on, much less what was happening in the meeting. None of it registered with me. My next and more permanent position during the presentation was with my forehead rested on my hand. My elbow was on the countertop. And to the other participants in the webinar, all that was visible was my tilted forehead on my hand. My eyes were down, so I didn't even have to look at the screen. And because so often we find that STEM has more opportunities than those in the humanities, this would be recorded and shown in perpetuity, or until some other NEH officer was able to visit our university via Zoom. A few moments later, I look up at the screen and notice that my camera had been on this whole time. I briefly shook my head in disgust at myself and mute my camera. Watching this 9 months later, I can both and can't believe that this is me. What was I thinking? I'm acting up in the meeting. I'm breaking all of the given yet unwritten rules of attending a professional Zoom meeting. I'm in my box, acting out of my box, my square, my bubble. Well, my bubble is my head, my clogged, foggy bubble of a brain, feeling like it's going to burst under the pressure of constricting blood vessels. I manage it. If you manage anything, you know that managing is a term for keeping it in check, but I never am really improving or alleviating. I've become an expert at it, in fact. I'm able to hide my pain very well. I hold my body in a way that I always look inquisitive. I hold my head slightly tilted to the left and switch to the right. When I'm at a stoplight in the car, I hold my head and look 90 degrees to the left and 90 degrees to the right. When I'm talking to someone, I wait until their attention has shifted, and then I shift my weight and body alignment to one side or the other, tightening my core as I shift a shoulder up or down. At home, I lay on the floor stretched out on an inclined pillow, or I roll on my foam roller while watching TV, and then I get in bed. The bed. I'm reunited with my heating pad, an old friend. So I just keep my pillowcase on it because the actual case got destroyed. The pillowcase bulkily lays haphazardly over the heating pad and on my pillow. I smooth out any folds and bumps and lay with it positioned along my spine, along my neck, and covering my upper back. In May, I woke up at 4 a.m. with a burning sensation on my right shoulder. I rolled to my other side and laid there until about 6. When I got up, there was a blister on my shoulder that was about 4 inches by 4 inches, about the size of a pint glass, the mouth of a pint glass. It was puffy and filled with whatever blisters are filled with. I took a hot shower, trying gently to wash it with soap and water with a cloth towel. I got out of the shower to examine it further, and it had popped. I thought it would go away on its own, but it started getting redder, more raw, and other smaller blisters started to form on top of it. My spouse insisted that I go to the doctor. What is a blister? A blister is a bubble on the skin containing fluid. Blisters are usually circular in shape. The fluid that forms underneath the skin can be bloody or clear. Doctors can usually diagnose blisters by looking at your skin, and they heal on their own without treatment. If needed, treatment will vary depending on the cause. Pieces of tape line the countertop in the examination room. A large chair set up straight, like in other physicians' offices. I sat in the chair with my phone in my hands and scrolled through social media as I wait for the physician to enter. A young woman, perhaps in her 20s, entered the room instead. She was wearing scrubs. It's always hard to tell the age of someone entering the room at a dermatologist's office. You never know if Botox or fillers have filled the lines of time to hide age. You never know if Botox has filled in age, so they just look younger. She asked me why I'm there. I tell her that I've been there for a burn that I got in May from my heating pad. And she asked me if I've been using the cream that I was prescribed. I said, yeah, this is my 3rd visit. She flipped over my chart, and she looked over and she said, oh, it is. She said, why are you here again? I pointed to my back, and she walked around and asked, that's a burn? I said it was a burn, but I don't know what it is now. It's opened back up, and that's why I'm here again. I ask her if she's ever seen anything like that before, and she confirms that she hasn't. She sits down on a stool with perfect posture and starts typing. I see patient on the screen, and I decide I don't want to read it anymore. She says, I'll go in and get Dr. Pierce. The doctor comes in and says, hey, how are you doing? It's fine, except for this thing on my back. I'm guessing that he saw on my chart that I'm from New Orleans, and he starts talking about New Orleans and Mardi Gras and Tulane. And then he finally walks around the back and says, oh, that's a burn? He starts pressing on it with 2 fingers. That really hurts, Dr. Pierce. Yeah, he says, keeps pressing down on it. Something's not adding up on this. Maybe it could be DFPS. What does that mean? Do you really want to know? Yeah, I'm a big nerd. I want to know. Oh, it's derma something sarcoma. Sarcoma. I recognize that word as something to do with cancer. Bubbles are meant to burst with that sensitive exoskeleton. Bubbles fly so haphazardly. Watch out, Bubble! You make me so nervous flying around with such little regard, little caution. The truth is, I need that bubble to burst. You know I can't live in any bubble. Then I inhaled again and returned to the bubble. I don't know what I was thinking. Well, I guess I was thinking about timing and safety. How can I feel so safe in such an unstable place? Well, I wash my hands a lot, and that produces many destructible bubbles, bubbles that you can just wash away. But maybe I'm afraid of washing this bubble down the drain. Maybe I'm scared of what will go with it. Maybe I'm excited about all the germs being washed down the drain. And bubbles are really so pretty on the surface, but that sheen can be so deceiving, so fleeting. Thanks.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you so much. It's really beautiful. It's really beautiful. Are folks okay if we move through presentations and then we save some time at the end to chat? Would that be all right with folks? I'm a terrible timekeeper, so it just helps keep me honest. Okay, great. Thanks, Jen. Sandra, if you are ready to roll, we would love to hear from you next.
I can't. Hello. I'm sorry I came in late. I was having some internet issues, which I have subsequently fixed. So what I want to do is I'm going to share a series of poems that I wrote while in my bubble. And I'm going to share my screen so you can see the way that they look on the page. And I'm going to start with the poem that I wrote in response to the call, right, for this work, and then explain some more about the subsequent poems. Worth the bubble. Time moves like rainbow bubbles, stuck at the red traffic light of the weekly drudge, immersed up to your neck in stagnant dishwater, your hands stained grease orange from Taco Tuesday. All the ways you try and mark the incessant sameness, your teeth yellow from a pandemic lack of hygiene as you yearn for the first green buds of spring. The blue notes of your piano keys play out the question you keep asking. Who is worth a bubble? The house by the shore blows out its own windows in the crepuscular indigo light, where everything and nothing is as it seems. So you stop and gather the violet shards of hope. And so that was what I wrote for the call. And, after that, I was noticing, what I noticed is all of the poems that I wrote, particularly after the call and this summer, it was interesting to see then who was in that bubble. And maybe, or maybe not shockingly, my students. And so I taught another class online. I'm back to face-to-face this fall, which has been interesting after teaching for a year and a half online. And I think maybe they'd be glad to know that they were with me, right, in my bubble, even though we were just virtual on Zoom. And so we had a lot of really great conversations this summer. I was teaching a relational communication class, so you'll notice some of that theme, right, come in. And we did spend a lot of time talking about relationships in the time of COVID as well. So this poem, my students and I talk about intimacy and what the next chapter could be. Claiming the moon as our own, love could work in private, slowly, unnoticed, something so distant that feels so personal. There are many ways a person could become lost, losing location like a worn out GPS, too old for software updates. If music is a metaphor of notes placed over the medium of time, then intimacy is all feeling. The logic of survival incomprehensible in the moment of connection within and outside of this thing called time. And here's another poem. Whoops. Oh my goodness, sorry. My scrolling skills are. Today, when I was teaching interpersonal communication, I realized there are things I never want to hear again, such as social distance, which used to mean the space before someone had made it into your intimate bubble, the place you could retreat when a spot that meant safety from interaction spaces delineated into neat slices, where you made the strange dog sit, which reminds me of social bubbles, how they became as rigid as class lines, making the mark during lockdowns, contamination on contact, etched onto vulnerable bodies, which my middle-ass self kept hidden, buried inside an academic article no one would read because anti-science is a religion, a righteous freedom beyond what is real. But now we use the word hesitancy as euphemism, hesitant meaning selfish, meaning embrace the I in individualism, like it is as free as pie, free to flout and fillet, to be loud, like to make selfish a political body, hesitant before social distances, to be here. Don't talk of resistance, immunity of the masses, which I hear as smoke and see as blood raining out of the cracks. Also, right, during these lockdowns, I'm turning 50 soon, soon, in a month. And so I think like many people, right, during the lockdown, and maybe on the precipice of, a particular birthday, you start to kind of re-examine who's worth the bubble, what should be in your bubble, what should, right, what should, happen going forward. And so I think maybe this poem will just speak to that, but it was also a moment when I was like, well, what's going to change? So on the precipice of their 50th birthday, the overachiever realizes it's too late to fuck up, to drop the biscuit and take up with someone 20 years younger, smoke in the tub, smoke during dinner, smoke in bed, make salad with the carrots of so many obligations, quiet the domestic din with a solo ride wherever the hell they want, no whining or neat packaged snacks allowed, and quit the gym, forgo the extra helping of greens, throw out the map of knowing, torch the considered plans with the lighter they stole from the corner convenience store in a town they've never been. And also forget to pick up the kids from school, ignore the pleas for every piece of themselves, skip the team training to get too drunk, the liquor burn, the slur of memory, then hit on the hot dean, punch the colleague who asked them to make coffee in a professional meeting, piss on the pretension and preening, teach students off the record, blow up the learning objectives, withered assessments with youthful verve, the smirk of a smart aleck, because they can't tell that younger self, the fracture of their personas, the rejections of face will soften and mold to their frame like lying in some unreturnable, overpriced bed. And the last two poems are about my old dog. I did, like maybe some other people, did get a pandemic puppy. So I now live with 3 dogs. So now there's a dog for every human in the house, right? So 3 people, 3 dogs. But the next 2 poems are really for like the first dog, the first mutt, right, that we had, because I don't know how everyone else made it through, but in addition to actually enjoying some, the people that I was sharing space with, it was these animals as well. Okay, ode to my old mutt. You always find me wherever, in insomnia or work's blasted grip, and sleep by my feet, ready, while the rest of the house is suspended in their own drama. When I shower or close the bathroom door, needing a moment without obligations, you stake your claim as champion and most trusted guard outside the dangerous domestic arena for when I emerge. I am the person you are happiest to see, even though I clip your toenails, weakening your lion strength like Samson, and make you bathe away the good smells of rot and feces and slobber. You are a mix of this and that, too little of anything to win a ribbon, but so much of what we need. Purer than a newborn baby, better than the end of the rainbow. And the final poem I'm going to share is also about my old dog. But I was, thinking about really the ways in which we have a hard time forgiving people. Because that was also something that I really had thought about, inside my bubble, et cetera, that sometimes we're more forgiving of, our dogs or animals that we share space with than, these other humans. And maybe there's something to, to be learned there. So what we forgive our old dog that we can't forgive people. 1, barfing up the pizza you stole on the top step of the spiral staircase in those hours when the darkened house is suspended in the time between. 2, when you leapt like a gazelle for the ham steak and snatched it off the fork, trying to gulp it down midair as you ran, moving so fast you earned best in show. 3, vomiting beside the kid's backpack the week of solo parenting. So in the rush, the squish between my toes became unimportant when I smelled the urine inside the bag. 4, eating the leftovers heated just through as they sat on the table for dinner, your speed belying your arthritic hip as I turned to find the salt shaker. 5. And I do have to tell you, yes, this really happened. We had a memorial service. I'm sorry, I usually don't put commentary in the middle of a poem, but we had a memorial service this summer for my uncle, when it was safe to, it was, kind of somewhat safe to travel. So this was, this last one is at the graveside. So just imagine this. Okay, so 5, peeing on uncle's ashes at the memorial service before we can place them in the ground. Our collective grief eased with disbelief at the way you chose to say goodbye. And luckily it did end well. My mother-in-law did not get mad, because it was one of those moments when you're like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? And the only thing that my mother-in-law said, well, that was Buddy's way of saying goodbye. So again, things that we forgive dogs that we don't give for, we don't forgive people. And so I hope that you see right in the series of poems that I shared, the wrestling with these ideas of bubbles and not. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. I'm still laughing. That's terrific. That's terrific. All right. So good. So good. Lindsay, how about you? Are you ready?
Yes. Okay. Let me get my screen all set up. Okay. Okay, so I want to introduce myself first. This is my first critical autoethnography conference. I'm enjoying it so far. I'm really loving this warm community. I feel like that is missing in a lot of academic spaces, so I appreciate that. I am in my 4th year in my PhD program at Oklahoma State University in the Social Foundations of Education program. So yeah, so my little presentation is about the summer camp bubble. I'm calling it a critical autoethnography of belonging. And camp bubble is kind of a common phrase in summer camp culture. So when I first read the prompt for this conference, that's immediately where my mind went, and was excited about that. The camp bubble kind of describes this idea of a set apart community away from the real world, usually doesn't have technology, so there's a big emphasis on just being out in nature and with the camp people. So that's a little background on that term, and then I want to give a background about this this study that I'm going to be talking about. So I did a pilot study for my future dissertation, which is going to be an ethnography of Christian summer camp culture. And I'm hoping to sprinkle in some autoethnography, because I think talking about my own relationship with the camp is going to be a really important piece of this. So the pilot happened this summer. I thought that I had a bigger paragraph. That's okay. Okay, so the pilot happened this summer. I was able to revisit the camp that I worked at in college and that I grew up attending as a camper. So I don't know what the pandemic has been like for everyone else in the world, but Oklahoma has been very proud of how open they have been, for better or worse. Good for me because I was able to visit a summer camp, but there were some challenges to that. So I was able to attend, obviously, but had to observe at a distance, and so there were some challenges. But Overall, the pilot allowed me to examine my positionality in interesting and important ways through qualitative and arts-based research methods. And it brought up a lot of really helpful methodological questions that I am still kind of processing and thinking about. And let's see. Yeah, so I'm not sure yet if this is the camp that I'm going to be returning to for my full ethnography, but regardless, I think it brought up some good questions. So my response to the prompt, I just wanted to read that to provide some more context. I reflect beyond my personal bubble, beyond my year of isolation, beyond my year of education, absent physical community. I consider my position within my own bubble, a new bubble, while remembering the summer camp bubble, the bubble of my youth. I belonged there for a time, but I also belong here, expanding my sense of self, understanding myself removed from cultural space. When I return to camp research, I will be both an insider from the past and an outsider, bringing new experiences and ideas to my return. But will I still belong, or rather belong again? So just wanted to define the bubbles that I'll be talking about. So I mentioned the bubble of my youth. This was the Christian summer camp that I worked at over 10 years ago. I was on staff there for 4 summers, so all throughout college. And then I was a camper from like 3rd through 10th grade. And then there's my new and current bubble, which is, I'm just thinking of that as myself, my own experiences and growth. I have aged and matured in every way, and I don't hold all of the same beliefs as I held when I worked at the Christian summer camp. And so then there's the return. So obviously I've changed outside of the Christian camp bubble, and the Christian camp has also transformed without me in it. So we have both grown separately, and now this is looking at what happens when we come back together. And then there's also another bubble being introduced. So the current camp staff bring their own outside bubbles in with them. Their outside culture, so call it like broad college culture and pop culture, kind of enter into this space. And I'll explain in the next slide. One of those examples is how they dress. So one of my first questions was, what do I wear when I visit camp again? I had a friend who was working there this summer randomly, and I asked him what it seemed like the girls were wearing, so I could kind of blend in and kind of reduce my visibility as an outsider. And he said huge shirts and tiny shorts. So I went to the thrift store and got as many huge shirts as I could find. Because I am now a lot older than I was, did not participate in the tiny shorts. So, but yeah, so you can kind of see I have the different outfits that were common. So in 1998, you know, certain sandals, sports watch, I wore a bucket hat, always carried around a disposable camera. And then in college, tanks were really popular. Sports watch still, especially because of the lack of technology. So you gotta be able to tell time somehow, and jean shorts. And then now we have the huge shirt, again, specific brand of sandals, and then the sports watch. So I wanted to appear that I belonged as much as I could, so that I could, you know, not draw attention to myself during this ethnography pilot. But I was visiting at the end of summer, and so I was an unfamiliar face. And everyone kind of knew each other at that point. There weren't visitors to camp because of the pandemic. So the staff recognized me as an outsider in that way. And Z. Nicolazzo talks about this type of belonging. She refers to it as relational belonging, or relational identity construction. She says that we might dress or act a certain way depending on how we believe our appearance and actions will be interpreted by others. So that was kind of all of the reasoning behind my wanting to fit in. So one of the data points that I'm using in my analysis is voice memos. I took voice memos all throughout the week, just recorded my own processing. And it was often while I was either driving back home or going on walks and things like that. So there were a few themes that stood out in these voice memos. One of them is physical activity and embodiment. So it became very clear very quickly that I'm older than I was when I was in college. I'm pretty out of shape. I don't hike every day. I was out of breath a lot. Being out in the sun all the time, got some sunburn. But after a few days of being at camp, I was proud of what my body was capable of doing. I felt stronger. I had tan lines already. And so I wondered how will my body transform during the longer term ethnography? What will that be like? What will my body carry me through? One of the unfamiliar pieces of the physical activity is that the camp staff did some choreographed dances at mealtime, which was new. And it was hard to tell in some cases whether that was like a pop culture thing that I didn't know about because I'm not in college anymore, or if it was a camp culture thing. So there were some pieces of that really made me feel like an outsider, but I wonder, is it because I'm a camp outsider now, or is it because I'm an outsider, I'm outside of college culture? And then language. So of course, there's a lot of religious jargon in these Christian spaces. So some examples are using the word worship to mean singing songs, testimony, which refers specifically to a story about a person's personal Christian journey. And then the way that they speak and pray. There was a master's thesis by Kukin, not sure how to pronounce that, but she studied the use of the word just as an adverb in American prayer, which is most commonly used in Texas, but is common throughout the United States. So as an example, saying things like, I just pray, or I just ask. And the use of the word just is linked to a desire for the prayer to be conversational and natural. And I still identify Christian, although it looks a lot different from what it used to in college. And I haven't really prayed out loud. So I don't know if that's something that I still do, but I remember definitely that being part of the culture when I was on staff, and noticed it a lot during my return. Okay, and then there was also a return to the language of the culture. So names and places didn't need a lot of explanation because I had experienced them before. So Catch the Pig and Bass is an example. It was a game that that the campers would play. It was essentially capture the flag, but instead of a flag, they used a rubber pig and a rubber bass. And then I remember talking to one of the staff members when I returned, and he said he was trying to get a sense of how familiar I was with the camp. He couldn't really tell. So he said, "Do you know what this event is that we do?" And he was referring to what they call Morning Camp Party Live, which is a long-standing tradition, was around when I was a camper. And it's basically just this really bizarre experience where you're singing crazy songs, and they do a lot of skits and a lot of really silly games. And so it's just a really wild time. So in both of these themes, the embodiment and the language, I felt like I belonged in a lot of ways, where there was familiarity. But then there were some bits of feeling like I didn't belong, like with the choreographed dances, or with my body being out of shape, or okay. And then I also did a walkography. This was another kind of main data point. So this little map here is a route that I took walking around the campground. So I started at the entrance gate, and I kind of made a loop, walked up through the woods. And during this, I was taking a video of my feet to kind of track the pace and the rhythm, and was giving commentary about what I was walking past and what I was seeing, whether they were different from my time as a staff member, or the same, and then memories that I had about those spaces. So the outdoor pathways were the same. The overall layout and structure of the camp was the same as it always has been. But there were a lot of updates. There were new buildings. There were remodeled buildings. The couches were new and not from the 70s anymore. So I found my way around the campgrounds really easily, but I felt like a stranger a lot of times walking through different buildings, not knowing where the bathroom was or which building they now use as the office and things like that. There is a study by an architect who studied space as a cultural artifact. And he talks about our familiarity with physical space and the built environment, and how when we're familiar with these physical spaces, there's a sense of belonging. So that really resonated with me, because I was like, especially when I was walking in the woods, I was like, man, I feel so at home here. This is, I walked through these woods so many times as a camper and as a staff member, and could make my way around really easily. But when I was in the buildings and they were new, it suddenly didn't feel like I was at the camp that I used to know anymore. Okay, so some final thoughts. I could easily feel a sense of belonging in the physical space and in the culture, as I talked about. And the challenges with feeling that belonging were due to the growth that occurred in my bubble and in the camp bubble when we were apart. So it was impossible for me to feel like I fully belonged, as I once did. But I also want to recognize that belonging is not static. And I wonder if after more time in the field, so if I did a summer-long ethnography, will my sense of belonging increase? But also, do I want to fully belong? I don't know if I do. There were, especially if that means that I need to believe all of the same things as the camp does. And yeah, there are parts of me that have changed that I'm really comfortable with, and I don't want to return to that. Yeah, and then I wonder what transformations will happen in 1 year in myself and in the camp. And will I need to figure out how to belong again? So what other parts of culture are going to change? Will I need to ask what to wear again? Will I still be wearing huge shirts, or do I need to go to a thrift store again? So yeah, things like that. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you so much. That's terrific. All right. Love these presentations. Okay, so now let's hear from Esther and Rebecca.
Okay, kia ora koutou. Awesome. You there, Rebecca?
Yeah, I'm here.
Make sure you're there, hon. Right. We've had so much fun with this. Stacey, when I saw your call, I didn't have a clue what we were going to do. And it's just led us in all sorts of places and spaces, and we're ongoing. But where we're at the moment is the way that blowing bubbles makes /kin. Right, so this is my mokopuna, Quinn. This is him last week in his first bubble bath ever. And it was just so beautiful. I got permission to put this up. And I just loved this because it demonstrated to Rebecca and I the way that whole relationship between bubbles and the theory of bubbles and what we've been investigating in this notion of S/kin. And I love the way in particular the bubbles are kissing his skin. And one of the things that we were looking at is the actual scientific creation of a bubble and the notion of it having this layer that encapsulates us, where the soapy substance has like a sandwich with the air caught between. And we were investigating the notion of thickening the skin. So that's where we're at. And so what you're going to see is a little tiny experiment of where we've talked with theory and some playing throughout this.
Okay, well, my inspiration for the bubble story that me and Esther have kind of still ongoing, as she said, is my bubble creations with my younger sister and her 4-year-old niece. And these are a couple of moments in the next 2 slides of bubble blowing with Aurora, who is the 4-year-old niece. So, oh, well, we can go, can we go back to the other slide for a minute? Sorry, Esther. Yeah.
Do anything. Almost.
I just wanted to show this because it was it was as 4-year-olds do, throw tantrums when things don't go their way, when bubbles burst. And Mum cradling her. And I really love this photo because I just love the skin to skin touch. Obviously I couldn't show their faces because that would be not nice. So I just wanted to say that there was always pain and bursting bubbles, and smiles turned to pouts, pouts turned to tears, tears turned to screaming. While I'm breathing in and out, Laura screamed, her mother is cradling her, kissing her. The young child fastens her body to her mum and makes new bubbles with the saliva from her mouth. How many sorts of consequences flow from this mother-daughter kiss, and the blubber making bubbles, these sticky threads. This is what Haraway calls fleshly love, and that kin for her is never a disembodied category. Rather, it is a routine encounter wherein the meaning and significance of love is already in the flesh, in the skin. This fleshly material semiosis matters when I'm part of Aurora's and her mum's bubble world. In our bubble, making bubbles, we take part in ordinary knots of daily living in a particular place and time. Even though our place and time may be extraordinary, our play is the ordinary routine of making and touching skin. Our knots tied with blood, our touch imbued with love, and inherited with irritation as well, as I was scratching my eczema just before I took this photo. Okay, now we can go to Aurora's full blowing bubbles. So this is Aurora in full blowing bubble mode, happy. And so I wrote a few words about these photos as well. Aurora, goddess of the dawn, is blowing bubbles again. Soapy waving, joy is playing, whilst her mum is making bubbles of her own in the shower. Aurora causes joy all around her, which is not the same as fun, Don Haraway says. Joy, the philosopher muses, does not just muse, but disrupts and relates, generates a becoming with. Aurora smiles and breathes in and out as the rainbow-coloured bubbles invite us inside, breaching our skin. We become kin with one another within a bubble, a very troubled bubble, but thick with skin and joy.
So we started this off, this was our abstract poem that we sent through, and there's a little bit of an add to this. That notion of thickening skin and the tempered stretchedness of the bubble and the skin around the bubble, linking it to Ingold's meshwork and exploring how we can thicken the skin of our S/kin bubbles, if you like. So connectedness, relatedness, COVID-19 through soap into our people ponds, singing irons, burning throats. We became bubble people with flexible, soapy bubble skins, a water sandwich of DNA, of friendship from before, in, out, out, in. Rebecca, do you want to do the second bit?
Yeah, we added glycerine to kindness, thickening connection, making fragile bubbles, in a suspension of time, creating a high of getting it, together in action. We reached across and within bubbles of air so we could all breathe in and out, joy without redemption. And I just wanted to put that last line there because, yeah, it's Clarice Lesbick, this line about joy without redemption, because it is a joy, but it's more complex than just fun. Yeah. Bubbles burst.
So in our investigation of playing with bubbles, we decided to have a chat. Rebecca is in the Wairarapa and I'm up north in Auckland, and we had an experiment with blowing bubbles. This is the one bubble I managed to make in the whole show, and I managed to actually chop up the film and get to my little one bubble. And so what we understood is that making bubbles can sometimes be difficult when you use your own recipes, and we'll talk about that a little later. But I think it's really interesting. We just keep playing with this notion of S/kin and the importance of both our kins and those kins that we often talk about, Stacey, in CAE are sometimes the kins that we make through the connections and relationships that we build in this space. And so we were exploring this for an hour, and it was quite interesting for us as we went through and looked at what we'd done in this hour, where we both sat somewhere in our homes, blowing bubbles and just chatting, and how playing, the importance of play and chat in between our bubbles can create and thicken the skin. So we've got some examples of thin skickening. Over this time, one of the things that happened is Dawn Fahey, waving out to you, Dawn Fahey, posted a fabulous photo of her yeast, her dough rising. And we started as happens in life when you're like a serendipitous researcher, you notice things, don't you? And so we were noticing bubbles in our daily lives, which are the sort of the bubbling or brewing of life in the home. I noticed bubbles in my mushroom soup when it started to come out of the pot, and
Yes,
all
yeah.
sorts of things. And do you want to say something about this, Rebecca?
Oh, sorry, Dawn's just saying that it was sourdough. Yeah, it was sourdough. But
Thanks, Dawn. We could almost smell it. The photo was so awesome, and it was just capture that. And where I come from, just down the road, is a place called Rotorua, which is boiling mud pools. And it reminded me also of, if you've ever got to make porridge and you get those huge big fat bubbles with thick skin on the top of them, and the different ways that bubbles are expressed in our daily lives. And Rebecca, I put this photo up. There's actually two photos here, but Rebecca was the bubble blower master. Do you want to speak to that, Rebecca, a little bit?
Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose I could take the title of master, but I brought my Esther went to the very science, rigorous experimental road and actually made bubble mixture in a kitchen. But I just bought mine from Countdown, so that's why my bubbles worked. I didn't.
I need to buy glycerine, but we're still in lockdown. Well, 3 is basically lockdown 4, and there's not much that we can purchase at the moment. So going to the next one, here's some examples of, we've tried to just draw out a couple of the examples that we felt demonstrated this thickening of skin. So we'd be interested in what you notice in these as well, and hoping it's all going to work.
Why can't you eat porridge?
But now I know why.
Why?
I'm gluten intolerant.
Oh,
But as a child, and we didn't even know about these words
No.
like gluten and all that back then. And
Yeah.
as a child, my mum had to feed me, I was saying to Mike the other day, she was raw eggs. Everything I could keep down was raw eggs.
yeah. I didn't realise you were gluten intolerant.
Not too bad. I'm not too bad. I just, all through my teenage years, used to faint all the time and all that sort of stuff,
Wow.
So they used to give me iron tablets because I'd be anemic and all that stuff, and told me I had irritable bowel syndrome, all these things they'd make up. And then one of my kids got diagnosed as gluten intolerant. And then we realized that was a problem with my other child as well. And then I looked, didn't know anything about it, read up on it, and thought, oh, that's what I've been suffering from all my life. Weird, eh?
Wow.
Yeah. It's just crazy. But anyway.
How
So-
does that happen? It must be hereditary.
Yeah. And I got it. Yeah. It's just,
All right, so hopefully you're able to see Rebecca's extraordinary powers of bubble blowing there. Okay, we've got a couple of other little ones here. Oh, don't you hate watching yourself on video?
Yeah.
Oh well.
you go to the mushroom factory, it's sort of between
The mushrooms.
Amber.
No, the mushroom factory.
Oh, I can't believe you don't know, but do you like mushrooms?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, it's like one of my favorite places in the world. When Joe first hooked up with Sam, we had to drive down and we took this little back road and we saw this mushroom factory.
Yeah.
You go in and you can get like crates of mushrooms.
Oh, really?
Our thing now is like, we did this last Christmas actually when we went down that road, went to the mushroom factory first before we went to where we were staying. Bought this big crate of mushrooms for the whole week we were there.
Oh my God, I'm going to have to go now.
Mushrooms and little portobello ones.
Oh,
and
awesome.
I love it. It's so cool.
Oh, yeah.
Rebecca, have you been yet?
No, I haven't been yet because I've been busy preparing for the conference.
Oh, well, mushroom shopping later.
Gonna go on Saturday.
Okay, cool. I'll find out how it went then. Oh, now we need the
Bellows.
one.
I need those portobellos.
Yeah, you do. Right, sorry everyone. I'll just make sure we've got this out of there. All right, into here. I'm getting really clever at this stuff now. I bet
You're a master
so
conductor.
good at this now, aren't we? Right, we can do a little bit of flipping here.
Strange time, but I mean, I suppose it's, in a way, it's kind of like, I don't know, like everything's changing. So I don't know. It just kind of adds to the uncertainty of what's happening in the world.
And the weirdness, eh? Like the limbo-ness of it all, the weight.
Yeah.
You can't make any decisions because you can't.
No. And I feel very, very lucky, you know, because I know that my youngest is going through a very horrible custody battle, and
it's this weird sort of state that we're in, and it was quite funny because people post up on Facebook or elsewhere. I think it was the 1919 influenza or something, and it went on for 3 years. People are in lockdown, and the stuff that I didn't even know about. You know, I did know something in the back of my head that we had these moments of the flu go through, but the fact that it was so radically dangerous, just like this lockdown that we're in now. But the difference now is that we've got this sort of access to each other.
I know, and it's quite incredible, right? I mean, there's no way we'd survive mentally this pandemic without Zoom. I mean, there's just no way.
Well, I wouldn't be able to work. You couldn't order your food. I wouldn't have money to buy food anyway. There's that as well.
Yeah, nobody would be able to work. I mean, the economy would, the global economy would crash. Hey?
Yeah, it's just, I mean, this bubble really is a bubble for the moment. And the kids can play and they can do things, you know. It's fascinating, really. And then I was reading about doing this ancestry work, and I found this interesting, following this interesting line called the Drabbles. And they came from the Peak District in Yorkshire. Really, really amazing tale that I want to explore more on. So I'm just sort of researching all around there now, you know, these different family that came from that area. And they married a Frith. And I always thought the Frith was like a variation on the Firth or something like that, you know. Blah,
yeah.
Anyway, the Frith, they came near this place called Chapel and Capel and La Frith, which in French actually means the church in the forest.
Oh, cool.
I know. And it's this little village right at the peak of the peak, if you like.
Yeah.
Where I'm pretty sure now these Friths sort of came from. I'm sort of reading all around that. And then down the road is this place called Eam or Enan or something. This other little village, isolated. And the big bad plague of the Dark Ages, you remember the big, we read it, well, you know, which we're not reading stuff. But this village is famous for creating their own bubble. They created a village, and they had these warnings outside the village that no one was allowed to enter.
Wow.
So all the people who were traders would come, and the villagers would leave the money soaking in vinegar, so the traders wouldn't, you know,
holy shit,
the virus, because they had a plague inside the village. And then each of the households was responsible for their own household if anyone died, you know.
Cool. So that's the story about the Peak Village, and that we shared at that time. And coming back to just about there, folks. We had a very joyous time, and we thickened our skin. It really was quite fascinating, wasn't it, Rebecca? That Rebecca and I knew each other a little, but not well. And over this time, we just can't believe how these conversations with the playing of bubbles have enabled a thickening of our S/skin. Rebecca, did you want to say something?
Yeah, and it's really interesting because I just started with the inspiration of my 4-year-old niece Aurora blowing bubbles and talking to Esther about that, and she seemed to find it interesting. And through that process, it's kind of like we've like stretched the bubble, I think Esther called it. And so it's, while I've been making my own bubbles with my sister and her daughter, I've also, you know, thickened the skin friendship with Esther, and we've created a bubble all on our own. And even like in the process today of coming to the CAE, you know, like we're extending and stretching the bubble again to encompass the whole CAE whānau. And yeah, bubbles burst, but they can be made again and stretched.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing this with me, Rebecca. Over to you, Stacey.
Thank you, Rebecca, and to Esther. And thanks to all of our wonderful presenters today, Jen and Sandra and Lindsay as well. We have a few minutes, so thanks for posting. There's lots of love in the chat. So if you haven't had a chance to see those comments, please have a tour through their speakers. Do folks have things they want to say out loud?
Bubble fabulous.
Thank you. Thanks, Denise. You might want to pop on gallery view. It's just a nicer way to maybe see more folks. That's great. So nice to see so many of you here. It was great to see you blowing those bubbles together, Esther and Rebecca. What a great collaboration. Other comments, other questions?
I just want to say to Jen, that was a really evocative presentation that you did earlier on, you know, and was really thoughtful. And with the blistering of bubbles, my sisters often sort of laugh, and we call each other blisters. And you know, and I thought about its relationship to this notion of skin, and how, you know, we're blisters, we're very important to each other, but sometimes those blisters are painful as well.
Yeah, really powerful work. And always you bring your whole self, as an artist, as a human, to the work, and it's just really moving. So thanks. It's so nice to have you back, Sandra, too. We've missed having you with us. Liz, I see you've got a hand up here.
Thanks, Stacey, and thanks, Sandra, Esther, Lindsay, and Rebecca. It was great. So good to hear from you all. I was just trying to think about some of the connections you just mentioned then, Rebecca, about tightening the skin between us. And I think that's such a lovely metaphor. And I think that's something that runs through all of the papers that we heard today. I guess one of the things I'm really interested in, you know, kind of bringing us back to the criticality part of autoethnography, I'd be really interested to hear where you're heading in terms of taking that, you know, step back in order to better close in on the story through the theory. I don't know who wants to go first.
Yeah, great question.
I thought you were going to answer then, Rebecca, because you're off mute. I was just going to say, Liz, that's, you know, as usual, your question is really pertinent. And as Rebecca said before, this is an ongoing sort of conversation that we're having, an experiment. One of the most exciting parts of this was our belief in the theory and importance of making as a way of making sense of our worlds, and actually putting theory into practice through the making and blowing of bubbles and having that conversation, and was quite exciting. And I'd written down something about what did I say? I don't think we knew what was going to happen. Rather more like serendipitous, we sort of decided to play with the blowing of the bubbles, that whole making and theorizing at the same time. But we were surprised at how powerful it was. And we're still looking at that importance of actually that embodied making and the doing instead of just the talking about.
Yeah, and I guess just to back Esther's comment up and relate back to your always beautiful questions, Liz, it's kind of that ethico onto epistemology, I guess, that you talk about, that you've talked about, Liz, in your book, and Karen Barad talks about a lot. And it is about making, like, our bubble making emphasize the whole CAE philosophy, if you like, of making theory stories, right? Because we were like theorizing as we were blowing bubbles, much to the horror of my family, who thought, who were questioning my academic priorities because I was writing a paper on blowing bubbles. Yeah, but it really did bring that home with me and Esther, like that the actual making and the doing is part of the kind of epistemology. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Oh, thanks, Sandra.
Yeah, so I just wrote something in the chat. And so while I, just read some poems, what I was hoping kind of came through in terms of the theory part was kind of a re-reckoning with intimacy theory. So, I mean, I study interpersonal communication, and so just, one of the things was thinking about how are we responsive, or how do we have to adapt, based on things that are going around us in culture, right? And thinking about some of the even questioning of assumptions about who does intimacy how, and what does that mean, and I've been studying this for years now, and even some of my ideas kind of having to expand, and there's nothing quite like teaching some of this, and so that's why I had poems about the classroom and thinking about these ideas of intimacy, and it really plays off of these ideas of bubbles and space and who's there. So I'm kind of interested to play more with some of those theories.
That's great, Sandra. I love that. And it was just it was a beautiful call to Lindsay's presentation when you said you just read some poems. I was thinking about the word just there in terms of that kind of, everyday, that kind of ordinary everyday, which I love in thinking about up against poetry, which people want to say is a kind of rarefied, form. And you really, Sandra, just make it so possible to enter into the world of your everyday in really moving and aesthetic ways. So I just want to thank you for those poems. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's right, Emily. It is a kind of denigrated a hedge, isn't it? Or a kind of qualifier, the word just. Any other questions, comments? Just bubbles as well. Yeah, Jen, right? Yeah. Or that turn in your piece when it's like, do you really want to know, really there? And why would you? It's just, yeah, resonating. Indeed, Emily, indeed. Wow, what a beautiful way. What a beautiful way to begin together. And as always, with all CAE things, I'm feeling itchy about the presentations we didn't see, and so full up and grateful for the presentations we did. And whilst we can't be together, the wonder of Zoom recording means that we can come back and see the work that we might not have been in on. So that's really a gift I'm feeling grateful for right now. Maybe we'll make some space for you to, you know, use the facilities, grab something to drink or to eat. What's going to happen at 10 o'clock, and what a great segue, is we're going to work with Denise in our first making session, and continue our poetry theme, which is really great. So Denise, will you remind us of the stuff that we need to have at hand? So if people haven't had a chance to gather, they can.
Yes. It would be great if you had a pair of scissors, but if you have your, fingers, you willing to tear some white paper, have at hand perhaps a book, a newspaper, magazine, but even if you don't have all of those, we'll make do. So just come along. We're just going to have some fun. You don't have to. You could just sit there and just giggle. That would be great too. Those bubbling joy up would be great. So looking forward to seeing you all then.
Great. Thanks, Denise. Oh, I can't wait.
Oh, yes. And we're going to have a bubble soul train line. Okay. So, the, all the poetry will be shared. We'll be doing some sharing on that. So looking forward to it.
Awesome. Thank you. So what's going to happen is we're going to leave this Zoom room, and then we'll reconvene in Zoom room number 1. And I've popped that into the chat. It's in the program as well. And thank you all for just getting us off to a beautiful, beautiful, inspiring start this morning. It's really terrific. Thanks to the presenters. All right, we'll see you in a few.